All right, if you are joining us, good evening and welcome to All Voting is Local's Teletown Hall. We'll get started in about 60 seconds.
Yeah.
All right. I see a few more people are joining us. All right, let's get started. All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to All Voting is Local's Teletown Hall. I'm so excited that you all are joining us today. I'm Olivia Lewis, reporter and editor at Bridge Detroit. We are a new media engagement platform for Detroiters. I want to thank All Voting is Local for hosting this call today. I think it's really important that we share this information. And I'm super excited to join you all today and learn a little bit more about the voting process and what we can all expect this fall. We have an excellent and well-informed panel with us today. I'm so excited to introduce them all to you, and I'll give them a little bit of a chance to talk about their work as well. But first we have Agogo Adebie, who is All Voting is Local's Michigan State Director. He was previously an attorney for Wayne County. Agogo was also a candidate for the state's House of Representatives in 2018, and he's very active in voter protection efforts. Next, we have Brandon Schneider, who is the Executive Director of Detroit Action, and this organization serves Detroit's Black and Brown, low and no income, homeless, and housing insecure population. He's been heavily involved in electoral and community organizing for the past 10 years. Next, we have Betsy Cushman, who is Vice President Voter Services at the League of Women Voters of Michigan. She is the past president of League of Women Voters of Dearborn Heights, and her work is focused in encouraging informed and active participation in government to influence public policy through education and advocacy. And a little bit later this evening, we will have Representative Rashida Tlaib also join us, who represents Michigan's 13th Congressional District. She joined the House in 2019, and she's known for her work in fighting for environmental justice, equity, and supporting small businesses. So with that, I'll turn it over to our panelists to give them a chance to talk more about their work. So Agogo, would you like to go first?
Yeah, thanks for having us, Olivia, and being our moderator. We're really grateful to have you. AVEL is really committed to making sure that everyone has equal access to participating in our election this year and going forward. That's what AVEL's about. All Voting is Local. And this is an unprecedented time with COVID, with the issues that we're facing across the country. And one of the things that we have to remember is that elections are about people collectively speaking with one voice. And we're going to have to speak differently this year. We're going to have to be socially distanced, 6 feet apart, wearing masks. And with that, there's uncertainty because we're going from, in a typical election cycle in Michigan, about 35% of voters vote absentee, and now we're having 75%. So that's a huge jump. And so it's okay to be concerned, and that's what this town hall is about, to make sure that people are educated and learn more. But at the same time, we shouldn't spread disinformation. Voting by mail is safe and effective, and it can work. And it's worked since 1864, when people who were fighting in the Civil War voted by mail and absentee. When you vote by absentee in Michigan, you have to sign an application, you have to sign your ballot. Your signature is verified at both stages with your official signature on file. And once you vote, you can't vote again because it's marked in the system that you've already voted. And we also at the same time have to realize that there's still some people who, either because they just feel more comfortable voting in person, or because they've decided that something with the absentee ballot process doesn't allow them to participate fully because maybe they have a disability, that they should still have the right to vote in person. And they need to be given the right to vote in person in 30 minutes or less. And we've got to make sure we have satellite polling locations so that people can vote early by absentee in person. We've got to make sure we have a vote by mail program that people are aware of, because a lot of people haven't done it before, and we need to have flexible hours, prepaid postage, drop boxes, and things, etc. And there's a lot of folks that need to help us out with that. Our clerks, our state representatives, our state senators, Mitch McConnell, and more. So, but with that, I'm gonna let someone else go, and I'll look forward to participating.
Betsy, would you like to go next?
I'll be glad to. I want to thank you for inviting the League of Women Voters to be here. We really feel that our democracy is at stake in the upcoming elections, and that every voice needs to be heard. Let Michigan show that we Michiganders rise in support of democracy. We will vote. And I want to tell you just something about the League of Women Voters. 100 years ago, most women got the right to vote in the US. Some of these women knew that it wasn't enough to have the right to vote. You have to know to use the vote and use the vote wisely. And they formed the League of Women Voters. We've been empowering voters and defending democracy ever since. 100 years we're celebrating this year. We go into high schools and colleges to register students to vote. We host candidate forums. We publish online voter guides on vote411.org. And we run nonpartisan campaigns to get out the vote. We never support or oppose candidates or political parties. When necessary, we do file lawsuits to achieve greater access to the ballot. As recently as last month, the Michigan League of Women Voters filed a lawsuit to remove more barriers related to the absentee ballot so that we could have full implementation of the voting rights that were created by Proposal 3. The Proposal 3 clearly requires clerks to count absentee ballots postmarked on or before Election Day. Yet a century-old Michigan law states that an absentee ballot isn't counted unless it's received in the local clerk's office by 8 p.m. on Election Day. Without that change, there could be uncounted ballots. So enabled by our voter protection partners, we filed suit. And I really hope that we win before the elections. And can I say a word now about Vote 411?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, because if you have the issues you care about, whether it's systemic racism, immigration, environment, education, gun control, police, the elected officials who make these decisions are elected by the voters, and you need to be involved in that process. So township, county, state, and congressional representatives whose names are on the August 4th primary ballot, that primary election is important. I just have to put in a plug for primary elections. People really need to get out. Every race is important. Every race is important. And I'll hold off on anything else.
All right, thank you, Betsy. Brandon, what about you?
Hey, so what up, though, folks? My name is Brandon Schneider. Apologies, my internet may be unstable, but I'm the executive director at Detroit Action. We are a community-based organization that's member-led, made up of working class, Black and brown Detroiters and young adults. We are fighting to make sure that all Detroiters have the political and economic power needed to tackle the racial and economic justice issues that we see here in our metro region. For a lot of the reasons that Betsy mentioned and a lot of the other reasons that Agogo mentioned, we believe that being able to engage in the electoral process is our pathway to power. We think that it's important to remove the barriers that working class Black and brown folks face every day when it comes to being able to access the ballot. When we think about any protest movement, when we think about any activist movement, our job is to be able to elevate the voices of those who are marginalized, elevate the voices of those who are also left out of the civic process. And we utilize this electoral process elections to really be able to do so. And so we're looking at this year as an opportunity to make sure that young folks have an opportunity to be able to talk about the issues that matter to them, whether it's criminal justice reform and policing, whether it's housing, whether it's jobs and the lack thereof, or unemployment, as well as make sure that we're able to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to vote. Literally, that everyone can vote. So we're happy to be here at the table and happy to be in this conversation with some of our esteemed colleagues, and really be able to talk about how we can make sure that the franchise is open and accessible to everybody. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you all for all of that wonderful information. And again, so if you are just joining us, I see that there are a lot of people who have joined us while we were doing introductions. Thank you for joining the call today with All Voting is Local. Let's hop into this discussion. And I know that Representative Tlaib is not here yet, but I've been told that she will be here soon. So we'll save the really difficult questions for her when she gets here. So let's get started. Given that we're in the age of COVID-19, what are some new challenges that we're facing that maybe we didn't really need to address before during the election season?
Well, I think one of the things that we are going to be challenged with is ramping up vote by mail. Luckily in 2018, Michigan voters by over a solid 2/3 majority passed a constitutional amendment allowing anybody to vote by mail without any reason, unlike the past. And, typically if you look in other states, in the first election when people are allowed to vote that widely, the level goes up to about 40, maybe 45%. There are some estimates that we're going to go up to 75% this year. And so clerks are having to expend resources to make sure that they're at this level basically overnight. And they're going to have to also be flexible and make sure that they're in-person options as well. And we have to support them, but also push them to kind of stay on top of the things that they need to stay on top of.
I would say that it's educating. It's exactly what Agogo said, only on top, trying to get the word out to people and reaching people to understand that, because there's a lot of distrust of the absentee voting process. I mean, voting in general, but certainly the absentee voting. And so how do we reassure people that their vote will count, that we have, in fact, a really good system going? And I'm really pleased that we have the current Secretaries of State office that is really behind and knowledgeable, and so that we know that we're doing a lot to make sure that you can trust our systems.
And the only thing I would add to that is I think that in addition to trust in institutions as a broad concept, I think the idea of allowing folks to understand and be able to take access of this new tool of vote by mail or absentee voting, as well as some of the other tools that we got in 2018 around same-day registration and automatic registration. I think that for many folks, they're just simply unaware that these things exist, or unaware of how they can use it. And so I think that that's one place and one challenge. So I think the other big challenge as we think about COVID this year, in addition to actually being able to cast votes, is also who will be able to count votes and who will be able to support at one election day. So being able to make sure that we have enough poll workers and enough folks who will be able to support at the election site, and making sure that those folks are protected is a key consideration that I know that city clerks here in Detroit, like Clerk Janice Winfrey and even our Secretary of State are thinking about.
Great. Thank you all. And so, Brandon, I'm actually really glad that you brought up tools to voting, because that's part of my next question. There's a lot of talk nationally about access to voting. So what are some of the existing tools, and what has Michigan done to ensure and expand access to voting?
So I'll just be brief and then feel free to jump in to my other colleagues. I think that one of the big tools to access to voting, as mentioned, is at the end of the, in 2008 with the Promote the Vote campaign, we were able to allow for same day voter registration, no reason absentee votes, automatic voter registration. These tools really allow, for folks who may be, who in the past may have had barriers to being able to access the vote, who may have had barriers to be able to get to the polls, to be able to cast a vote at their convenience. So I think about myself, as a kid, as a son of a working class family, where my dad works for the city of Detroit, my mom, works for the city, works for another entity as a janitor, and often they work, 2 and 3 jobs. And having to make time between the jobs to go cast the vote or take time to get to the elections and get to our poll location early. Now with the ability to cast an early vote, now with the ability to cast an absentee vote, they're able to to not have to stretch and do all the sort of coordination, if you will, to be able to exercise their civic rights. So I think that that's one real opportunity to sort of even the playing field and allow working class families to access the ballot and to be able to have a fair say in what goes on in our community. I think another tool that goes under just sort of underreported and not as engaged as much is online voter registration, which is one of the things that Governor Schneider actually signed into law towards the end of his term. And I think that with online voter registration, it really allows for young people and for, again, ease of convenience for people to be able to register to vote, on the Secretary of State's website, utilizing the proper tools and the proper identification that we have, that you may have.
Okay, anyone else want to weigh in?
Well, I would just say that I think we have like a great foundation in Michigan, but it's important to fully utilize the tools that we have. So we have this constitutional amendment that passed through Proposition 3, and one of the components is satellite polling locations. And currently, a clerk is only required to have their office or these satellite polling locations open for the 8 hours on the Saturday and Sunday before the election. But given the environment that we're in, that needs to be expanded greatly. And I would just encourage those who are listening to call your local clerk. Go to michigan.gov/vote and look up your clerk and call them and say, I need expanded satellite polling locations. We need them at least for 2 weeks before Election Day. They need to be in hours that are outside of normal business hours so that people who are going to take care of the kids or got to go to work can still exercise their right to vote in the satellite polling location period. And we've also got to get Mitch McConnell to pass the HEROES Act, and call your senator, call him, and get this money rolling so that we can fully staff up and have our voices heard this November.
Great. And so, Betsy, do you want to weigh in?
I really want to give more of a plug to Vote 411 because it is important to know who the candidates are. All this voting is so important, but find out who the candidates are and how they stand on issues, and that you can find on vote411.org. Plus, it has links to check to make sure that you are registered to vote. You might think you are. Go online and check. It's easy to do it, and it's really a good tool before, so that you don't run into problems when you get to the polls if you vote in person. And again, the advantage of absentee voting is that you can still do it before absentee voting, actually. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we have a quick poll question. I see some people have already answered the question, but so the question is, how will you be voting in the upcoming election? Press 1 if you are planning to vote by mail. Press 2 if you are planning on voting in person. So it looks like we're at about 50-50 right now, which is interesting. Panelists, you guys have any comments on voting by mail or voting in person, especially with this, with our respondents saying 50-50, half are gonna vote one way, half will vote the other way?
I'm wishing that everybody would vote absentee, but I know that's not possible, and there are many good reasons why you have to vote in person and need to and want to. So I really support what Brandon is saying about using all the tools that we can.
Yeah. I think one of the considerations that we have, you know, again, from Detroit Action's perspective, is that we organize young adults and we organize a ton of high schoolers this is going to be their first time to engage in the voting process. And, you know, while we want to make sure that everyone's safe, and we want to make sure that, again, like Betsy's saying, that everyone is using absentee because it's just, you know, frankly, safest option to stay home. You know, many people won't because, you know, they're used to going to the polls or take pride in, you know, waking up and going to their election, to their polling location. And so for us, you know, the real key is like, how do we make sure that, you know, for young folks, you know, they have the tools necessary to cast their vote for the first time, maybe? How do we make sure that the poll workers who are there, that they're safe? And how do we really make sure that everyone is safe and that we're able to do, you know, not have problems like we've seen in Georgia or Wisconsin over the last few months.
Okay, so we have another poll question. I'm going to read it and then we'll allow everyone to vote. How far would you go for a drop box? Press 1 if it's 1 to 5 miles. Press 2 if it's 5 to 10 miles. And press 3 if it's over 10 miles.
Congresswoman's here.
Oh, great.
Go, go! I missed you.
Hello.
Hey,
Oh,
look who it is.
I'm sorry, y'all. We're voting, so I have to vote and then run across the street. So I'm sorry.
No worries.
No
Thanks
worries.
for
We're
coming.
glad you could join us.
Thank you all for promoting the beauty of voting and being engaged and outvoting hate.
All right, so we were in the middle of a polling question and I'm gonna stop the question now. All right, let's read some of these answers. So the question was, how far would you go for a drop box? And our response, let's see, if 1 to 5 miles, about 64% said that they would go 1 to 5 miles. 20% said they would be willing to go 5 to 10 miles, and 16% said they would be willing to go more than 10 miles. So panelists, do we have any responses to that information?
Yeah, well, I think it emphasizes the need for increased funding. Luckily, the Secretary of State of Michigan is going to help out with purchasing drop boxes, but that's expensive. And I know my leadership here would love if everyone went to instillIvote.org/heroes to get engaged in the process of making sure we have federal funding to back this up, which is so crucially important. And I know the Congresswoman agrees as well. But having drop boxes under the EAC mandate, and for those who don't know, the Election Assistance Commission, that's about, the requirement is that you have 1 drop box for every 20,000 voters. In the city of Detroit, that's 26 drop boxes, so that people all across the city have one in their neighborhood, and they don't have to travel more than 1 to 5 miles. It's not foreign, voting is not this foreign, weird experience. It's something that they can embrace, and I think it's important that we do that. And I think that polling question just brings that to life.
Great. Anyone else?
Yeah. Just one point to that that Gogo mentioned, as we talk about like the need for accessible drop boxes, and you know how we actually don't want to have people travel, you know, a long way to cast a vote, is that, you know, we're often forgetting in this moment, or at least many of us aren't forgetting, but you know, Detroit is also a city that doesn't have, you know, regular mass transit or accessible mass transit. So for many folks, having to travel, in excess of 1 to 2 miles will often dissuade them from casting a vote if it's not in their neighborhood. So we want to be able to make sure that, again, that we're removing barriers and we're making it easier for people to cast votes instead of like erecting, barriers that way, and preventing folks from casting votes. So I think that as we think about more drop boxes, we also have to be thinking about like how do we make sure that like organizations who are known intermediaries and known allies and community trusted partners are able to collect ballots for people, and we're able to think about like what does it look like to ensure that again that we have lots and lots of early vote polling locations. Again, this is something that I know that the city of Detroit is thinking about when we think about early vote polling locations, and we're thinking about it in a lot of other municipalities. But being able to have those tools in the toolbox is key if you want to be able to not have the same type of problems that we've seen some other states have, and ensure that everyone exercises its rights.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so I'm gonna ask one more question and then we're gonna dig into some of our listeners' questions because they are starting to pile up. I know you guys have a ton of questions you wanna ask. So what about action? Just given everything that's going on right now, from COVID-19 to police brutality to access to voting, how else can voters ensure that their voices are being heard on issues that are most important to them? What are your suggestions?
So anybody can answer?
Yep, anybody.
So I think folks don't, maybe you all need to hear this like from a Congress member that has to come into a room full of 434 other colleagues. But I think it's really important for you all to know when you protest and marched, all of a sudden justice and policing was possible. So I could have never imagined that a handful of Republicans would have supported us on getting rid of qualified immunity. The fact that you all marched, all of a sudden, police officers were charged. We could have never imagined happening, right? I mean, so every time you march, meaningful action happens. So it can't just be this once or twice a year where you just vote. It has to also translate into this kind of movement work that you see on the streets. And I know this because, look, growing up in Detroit, if you look at even the labor movement, just think about it. I mean, people died for that movement and really kept marching and saying, we're not going to allow the corporate bosses to tell us we don't deserve health care, that we don't deserve collecting bargaining right to organize, and really say, look, we deserve human dignity in the workplace. I mean, people were dying in the automotive industry working those places. I mean, I see Betsy nodding her head, but it's real. And so even when we organize teachers, all of a sudden, I mean, folks don't remember because, I mean, some of us weren't born right ago, but kids had to actually pay for textbooks, y'all. Like, I mean, there's so much that happened primarily not because of who's in the White House, not because of who's in the Congress, because you all marched and you spoke up and you weren't silent and you were demanding more change and moving with a sense of urgency. So don't underestimate, collectively coming together and doing that. And that has to, again, go hand in hand with the voting and exercising that right to vote. Because to me, that's how you translate really the change. Again, it goes hand in hand. So Grace Lee Boggs taught me that. I mean, she said the race consciousness that is raised in the streets is where change can happen, where it can reach the halls of power.
Anyone else?
Can I just say the two outings that I've done since the COVID self-quarantining have been to 2 Black Lives Matter protests in Dearborn, and I've been really proud that Dearborn has held them and that we've been involved. And I'm so thrilled to see, after years of going to protests, that it's, again, change is happening. I really applaud the Congresswoman for talking about it, because you need to be encouraged to know that it really does make a difference that you show up at those protests if you can, wear safely, wearing a mask and all that. Yes.
Right. All right, and Congresswoman, I would be remiss if I did not ask this question, but can you give us just a little bit of insight of what's happening on Capitol Hill now? What's up with the Heroes Act?
We're just spending Affordable Care Act. We are making sure that we strengthen the Community Reinvestment Act. We have a number of bills. One of them in particular I know impacts my district for all of us. We're really wanting to protect people's credit report during the pandemic, and we don't want, because any bad marks in your credit report, it can impact your employment, it can impact your housing. And so we're trying to pass a measure right now on the floor to, have a protective measure to push back against that. And I know for Detroit Action, it's a huge issue for a lot of our members and our workers and communities across the country. And so, as we push for these moratoriums, which are wonderful, I mean, we need them. People know these bills are going to be due. The water bill, the rent, mortgage, the student loans, all of those things that we have temporary relief on, they're not going to go zero. They're going to be due. And so it's so important. And what we also are worrying about, and you're seeing this, and it's unfortunate that corporate greed continues to profit off of our pain. But I'm getting calls from residents that went to get a test. And please, please go to places that are free, because the urgent cares are not free. I don't care if it has Beaumont in front of it, Henry Ford. Know that they actually buy there's a agreement with a for-profit entity when you go there. So it's not really Henry Ford or Beaumont. They're just using the name. And so they're getting bills, $350 bills for like antibody testing, all these things. To say this is that I know that we can't afford to get these on our credit report. So that's something that we're working on. The other thing is, I introduced dismantle mass incarceration for public health. There's 700,000 folks in jail right now that are legally innocent, that are waiting for trial. They're waiting for going through the process. And, they don't deserve to be in prison and jail institutions right now that are not prepared to deal with the pandemic. And, they don't deserve this kind of death sentence. And we're getting calls from all over the district. And Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley and I and Congresswoman Barbara Lee introduced that. And again, it would require, letting these, folks, these are about, I would say, 99% of those in jail right now across the country are people that are literally waiting for their trial, and they can't afford the cash bail bonds, you guys, and they're just too poor. They can't afford it. And again, these are broken systems that were already broken before. We're not normal and we're unjust, but it's really shown its face during the pandemic. So these are kinds of things that we're working on. And of course, you all know I am not giving up on reoccurring payments. Y'all need recurring payments. These one-time things are not working for people. And so the Automatic Boost to Communities Act is critically important. I know for so many families that are struggling. So I really want to try to get people $2,000 a month. Still pushing forward. Chill's getting a lot of my colleagues on board. But again, a lot of the things that I'm doing are possible because of the work you all are doing in the communities and out in the streets, because I bring the district with me to DC and I share these stories about people not being able to wash their hands, y'all. Like, we got $1.5 billion in the last COVID relief package because you guys all kept chanting, water is a human right, water is a human right. And so continue your efforts, and I love you all for it, because you really do fuel me, because sometimes I can't get here and I just don't get it why nobody sees the sense of urgency, but you all keep us focused. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Olivia, for the question.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so let's dig into some of these questions from our listeners. I know we're running a little bit short on time, so I'm going to try to get through as many as possible. I'm just going to read through some of them instead of opening up the line, because that'll go a little bit faster. So,
and Olivia, we can go over a little bit if need be. So we don't have to stay strictly to 45 minutes if people have some time on our panel.
Okay, good. We may have to go a little bit over, just a little bit. So we have a question from we have a question from Kyle in Redford Township, who said, I applied for an absentee ballot and I'm now wondering if I'm required to use that or if I can vote in person.
Go. Correct me if I'm wrong, or Betsy, but I know even before, obviously when we passed all those reforms, there's wonderful reforms to make it to vote easier. And I know that you can bring your ballot, if you get it at your house, bring it to the polling location and let them know that you want to vote in person. Make sure you wear a mask. Also make sure if your voting location is, for instance, a church, what I've been hearing from a lot of my clerks, I have 12 different clerks, is that a lot of the churches where you might have traditionally gone to vote, are now closed because of the pandemic and are not able to open up. So you just make sure and double check you have the right information with you, but please do take your ballot with you to the polling location. What they'll do is they'll destroy that ballot and give you a new one. And again, Betsy and Agogo can confirm, but I know from previous elections and doing voter protection, that's what I've witnessed.
Yeah, I just wanted to, could you repeat that question? I was just confirming we can go up to an hour if that's okay with everybody. I was just confirming that on my end. But yeah, no, that the Congresswoman is exactly right. If you get an absentee ballot, you can turn it into your polling location and you'll sign an affidavit turning it over and they'll just destroy it. And you can vote in person as you regularly would. You can always turn it in directly to your clerk within the period of time. So there are multiple ways to return your absentee ballot or vote this year. And we're just trying to make sure that people have that route to exercise their right to vote this year.
Okay, so we have another question from Miller in Detroit. He says, I still haven't received my absentee ballot. Why is it so late? I want it in time so I can send it back in time. How do we know when we send it back and that it was received?
So to answer that question real quick, he can go to michigan.gov/vote and he can track the progress of his absentee ballot getting to him. He just needs to put in his name, his birth year, his zip code, and he'll be able to figure out where his absentee ballot is. If he hasn't requested it yet, he can also go to that same site and request the ballot both for August and November.
Olivia, does he say what city he's from? Does it say?
I believe from Detroit. Yep, from the city.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So once in a while, what happens is it takes a little while, but please make sure that if it's like that Friday you got it and election's Tuesday, but you need to walk it to your clerks or get it to your clerks. But I know at one point Detroit City Clerk office, and again, some people said they got it, some people didn't. I got a little card in the mail, which if Clerk Winfrey's Janice Winfrey's listening, this is a really great thing because it was kind of affirmation. But I got a little card. It was small and it said, "Hey, thanks for voting. We got your absentee ballot." I don't know if anybody else got that, but I got it once. I don't remember which year, but that was pretty spectacular. But again, I think you can go the go route of checking online. And I always do this thing where, I have access to it, but I sometimes go to the voter file and see if it has a little check later on to see that I actually, I don't know if Betsy does that too. But yeah, it's good to be cautious and to make sure, but I definitely would, urge, our clerks to kind of figure out some sort of way. And again, I know resources are limited, to figure out some sort of way so people feel reassured that the ballot got to them.
Great. All right, let's go to our next question then. Judith from Bloomfield Township asked, this is the first time I will be voting absentee. In applying for the ballot, I learned that my township received ballots late. What is being done to address and prevent this in the future? What if USPS is in trouble? How will administrators accommodate drop-off locations? Anyone want to take a stab at that?
I was waiting for a go-go. You go for it.
Yeah, so it is, I think, there are multiple challenges with voting by mail. We've got to get the ballots out to people in time. And, the process is, we have these primaries that are coming up. The ballot language has to be approved. The setup has to be approved by your county clerk. Then it goes to your local municipality, and then they have to mail it out to you. And that takes time. And clerks are busy trying to extend that period of time as much as possible. But they need help. They need help through the legislature. People need to call their state representatives and state senators and urge them to pass HB 756 and 757 so that they have more time to process absentee ballots. They need to call Mitch McConnell and tell him to pass the HEROES Act so they have more money to get this out on time. We need to have drop boxes, and that needs to be publicized so that if we are concerned about mail, and the U.S. Postal Service, they're doing the best that they can, but they also need support, and you also need to be able to directly deliver your ballot to your clerk in as many different ways as possible. So we share that concern. We're working on it, but call your clerks, call your state representatives, call Mitch McConnell, and tell them that we need help.
And if you're on this, Zoom kind of like you're watching this live, you're probably, a person that has access to internet and can see, go to the social media pages for your clerk's office. Sometimes I use that as a way to say, hey, I haven't got my ballot, or like, what can I do? Just engage them even in other ways if it's not just the direct phone call. But absolutely, I do want folks to know, add a couple more days. Mail is slow because of the pandemic, and I want you to be a little bit more patient and kind of plan ahead, and be careful. Be wise about that. Don't. I know we're always so impatient. We're like, oh, I put it in the mail on Friday. Should have been able to get there by Tuesday. Know that I have seen in some of my clerks 50%, which is so wonderful, 50% increase in ballot requests, y'all. Like, so there's a lot more of you all voting. And so just continue to push forward and ask your clerk what's up, what's going on. Especially townships are smaller. They rely heavily on volunteers. I know, my Redford Township, folks were kind of like, really urging people like, we need some help. And I know a lot of other city county, township employees came and helped the clerk to get some of those ballots out. So they're trying to be creative and trying to move as quickly as possible. I can tell you this, what I've heard from everybody is, Secretary Benson has been extremely proactive and have gotten ballots way early. I've never seen ballots at the clerk's office this fast. I don't know if anybody else has. I mean, usually it's right around the July 4th holiday, but now it's 2 weeks before that a lot of people got their ballots and already been voting.
All right. Let's get to some more questions. We have a question from Kirk Hunter in Detroit. He says, in Detroit, people are often unable to get to voting places. Will they have buses set up at different churches that people can go to get to polling places? Also, since voter suppression is real, can we have chairs and water for people standing in long lines across the country?
I wish. I can tell you this. So I have to double check, but at one time, I know last year, or the last election, like 2018, I believe Lyft was offering free rides to the poll. So look out for notices like that. So some of the companies have come out, and I know Lyft was one of them, that basically if you, knew how to do the Lyft program, and most of my residents, even if, they use it for getting your doctor, sometimes the insurance covers that kind of trip. So they already have the app. I know that's a little difficult, but don't also underestimate calling. Like, you can call my office if you live in my district, and like, we have volunteers that, pick up people and take them. And so you can call various campaigns that might actually help you coordinate those trips. I know every polling location is different. I know when I go to my polling location, I actually have a cooler in my trunk. If people, I have a cooler in my trunk, and I learned this because I worked on 2008 Obama campaign, and the lines were really long. And it just clicked to me ever since then. It just kind of been ingrained in me that I go to each one of my polling locations. I have like 200, close to 250 of them now. And I just literally have this big cooler and I pass out stuff. But I know some polling locations, especially some of my community-based ones that have been doing it a long time, there are people that are offering, food, snacks, things like that. But I know those that are, especially my disabled neighbors, they are still struggling and have even reached out to, especially Detroit City Council, a city clerk's Winfrey's office, and, expressed, how difficult some of the locations are, and that there needs to be a lot more access for our disabled neighbors. And so we continue having to fight on that end. And I do think, these are very serious, infringements on people's right to vote, and we need to focus on that. But yeah, it's not universal. It's not like a requirement as you wish. But I know each one is very different. I know a couple of locations, I love it. Some of the, volunteers that are just outside of the polling locations are just doing that on their own.
Great. And Brandon or Betsy, do you guys want to weigh in on this question too, especially since you guys are working locally with local organizations? You guys want to weigh in?
The League of Women Voters did have some limited lift 2 years ago. I haven't heard that they are offering that again at the polls. So it is such a need. It's a call that we get, and we always just say call the campaigns of, call the party offices of refer them. So
Yeah, I think to the Congresswoman's point, and also think to Betsy's point, one of the things that's needed is just like making sure people are comfortable as they wait in line, especially August election where it's going to be hot, it's going to be humid, and and you're going to have people potentially seeing longer lines than we've seen before. Hopefully not, but you always have to think about it. I think just making sure that those sort of comfort accommodations are thought of. I know a lot of the campaigns do that. As was mentioned, Lyft did that in Kentucky. It's done it in a number of places throughout the cycle, getting people to and from. And then, one of the things that we do as Detroit Action is really just try and make sure that if we're knocking doors or we're talking to folks, and we're making calls and you say you need a ride, then we make sure that that's the thing that we're marking down and making sure we can get you a ride. So that's, so I would say a number of the organizations that are going to be out there and mobilizing folks to the polls, like us, like the NAACP, like the League of Women Voters, et cetera, are trying to figure out ways in which people can get to and from, so that way you can cast a ballot no matter like your situation around transportation.
All right, great. So another question this is from Arlette in Clinton Township. Arlette asks, what can we do to support Native American voting right now / support them in general? Anyone?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to support in-person voting. The thing is that not every Native American has a stable address where they can be sent an absentee ballot. And we have to remember that. Vote by mail, I think, is a great thing, and it's something that we should expand in the way that Washington and Oregon have done. But it's not a one-size-fits-all for everyone. And our Native American brothers and sisters need to have the ability to be able to vote in person. And they need to be given socially distanced measures. There needs to be PPE. We need to make sure that there are multiple days through the satellite polling location process. People need to call their clerk. Call your local clerk and make sure that they give you multiple options to vote in person in the 2 weeks before Election Day so that people can vote safely.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize this because I've seen this done in other communities. One, your clerk has so much power. I mean, everybody always thinks it's like the president or it's like the governor. No, your local clerks actually have so much incredible power and decisions on how to make voting accessible. But other clerks, what I've seen is they call them, and actually Clerk Winfrey has done this at the Rosa Parks Transit Center, is creating what we call satellite locations for voting. So you go where people are at. Oh, hi, how are you? Hello, sorry. Nice to see you. Thank you very much. No, it's okay. God bless you. Thank you. And so one of the things is like it's having these kind of make up satellites. So as an organizer, and I think Brandon and I learned this early on, you go to where people are at, especially our most vulnerable. And our Native American community needs us to go to them. And so I would encourage folks to talk about that, having satellite offices, and they can actually set it up, y'all, for like Friday and Saturday to come out and be able to vote on a Friday and Saturday versus just waiting all up until Tuesday, especially Saturday, satellite makeup. Again, all that is possible. And they get clearance from the Secretary of State to do it and everything, and it's completely legal. And again, it just increases access to voting.
Yeah, And one key thing, I appreciate the shout out from the Congresswoman. She knows everybody in the street, so so that was cool to talk about, like, coming at the most impacted. So one thing that I think that we see that at Detroit Action that our Native American brothers and sisters also experience is the inability for people to get their ballots at their PO boxes. Like, that's one key factor that prevents a lot of the homeless or transient folks that we represent at Detroit Action from being able to cast a vote. That also impacts a lot of Native American brothers and sisters when you think about their ability. Gogo mentioned that a lot of folks don't have physical addresses, so to speak, where they can get their mail. People often rely on PO boxes to do so. And recently, one of the things that was taken out from at the federal government and from some other places, the people's ability to actually receive their mail and receive their ballots at their PO boxes. And in order, again, for people to be able to cast votes wherever they may be or whatever housing and living situation they're in, we need people to be able to receive ballots to be able to vote at whatever address they can use.
All right, thank you guys. So we have another question from Lakeitha Hester in East Point. So Lakeitha asked, how can I get online forms if I am blind? How can visually impaired people vote by mail or ensure that our votes are cast?
So I actually think the Secretary of State rolled out a process for blind voters to be able to vote absentee and request their ballot online. But the best resource is to call either the Secretary of State's office or your local clerk's office, because they will have all that information for you. But I know the Secretary of State, Secretary Benson, is taking steps to make sure that the members of our blind community can be able to vote absentee in this election as well.
And do it early. I know it's a pain. And I you have no idea how hard it is to hear from so many of my disabled community. I hear this all the time. Just start early, and yes, call your clerks, but if you're not getting a response, some of the offices will close and things like that, please lean on your state representatives and your state senators. Call them and say, look, I'm visually impaired. I need somebody to walk me through this process. How best can I go? Can I go early? Can I go, where can I go? How can I? And they sometimes have direct access. Sometimes they have the cell phone of your clerks off it, directly to your clerk.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have personally done that, called on behalf of some of my folks directly to the person in charge to say, I want to send this person. I want somebody from the clerk's office to call this person directly and again, walk you all through the process. So please go ahead and reach out as soon as tomorrow and seek out that help right away. There's always an option. It's just the information is just not getting out there to you all. And please do share it with others that because I know especially my visually impaired neighbors, yeah, you guys got a support group together and it's beautiful, and just kind of lean on each other and share some of those resources you might hear about from your own clerk's office.
All right, let's see. I want to get through as many as possible. We have about 3 minutes left. Let's take this question from Evelyn in Detroit. She asked, how does mail-in voting compare to going to the polls? I usually go to the polls, but I live in a senior building and was invited to use mail-in voting. Are we prepared for that?
Yes, you are. No, we are. We're getting, but I want you to know, I am a person that loves going to the polling location. There is something, it's like this, I don't know, it's like a field trip. It might be because as soon as I was a little girl, I watched my parents be able to vote for the first time ever in their lives. Being a child of immigrants, and there's this experience and kind of memory that comes with when you go. And I mean, Betsy's smiling, but we all at some point gone with our parents and just witnessed that. I took my kids with me. I take my kids with me all the time. But I also want you to be safe. So especially my seasoned residents, you all know, I want you to be safe, and I want you to be able to, experience that. But if anything, be prepared, get your absentee ballot. And if you do decide at that moment that you'd rather go to the poll, then go ahead and do that. But we are definitely, I know the Secretary Benson and all of us are very much prepared We already see it. We already knew it's going to happen. I don't think our Secretary would have, of State, Benson, would have sent every single person a absentee application if they weren't prepared. And I know that they have really beefed up and really are focused on making sure, and again, we're fighting here in Washington to make sure she has the resources that she needs. But we are prepared.
I just want to say, for the sake of our panelists and for the sake of our audience, I just got some numbers about how many people are participating in this, and there are about 8,200 people either listening in on the call or through Zoom on Facebook Live. So thanks for everybody for being involved.
Yes, thank you so much. And I know we're creeping up right at 8 p.m. And so I want to take this opportunity to just say thank you all for participating today, for listening in. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to All Voting is Local for hosting this call. It's such important information that everyone needs to know about. So a go-go. Betsy, Brandon, and Congresswoman, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Any last words from the four of you?
I want to say a word: vote411.org. It's throughout the country. Find out who the candidates are. It really is important.
Yeah, and I absolutely. And Betsy, I've actually offered that to my residents to use that to be informed. I just want you all to know, there's not this perfection with voting, but it's not like it has to be just absolutely perfect, if that makes any sense. So I know for a fact when you go in there, some of you might be for the first time, some of you may never have voted like by mail. Understand that this is, this is so critically important that you exercise it, that it's okay to seek out help, to ask questions. We had a resident call and say, am I supposed to put a stamp on there? And I said, it depends on your clerk. Does it say the postage is needed? Those are not, again, those are not information, that is readily available. And sometimes it's the most simple things, right? But I just want you to know, when you vote, you showing up for each other. And when we show up for each other, we save lives. We push an agenda that is powerful. So when you vote, you're bringing your whole neighborhood with you. You're bringing your issue with you. And so, and do it with so much joy, because one thing is, people that look like us, they don't want us voting, y'all. So just get out there and just, in their face, boom, vote. So me and Brandon can brag about how, yeah, our people vote. So please do that. And I just really am so thankful for this call and all of your advocates that continue to do just amazing job uplifting our communities.
I would just also say, we have a lot, other tools in the toolbox that we can use. Voting is one of the tools that, is often stripped from us and is often, there again, barriers are put in front of folks to not be able to use this tool. So we want to be able to make sure that voices are elevated, people are heard, and this is as best time as any, especially during the pandemic that we're living in, the response to it, and also the global uprising that we're seeing around police violence. So, we're out in the streets, we're encouraging folks to connect their values and their lived experience to action. And one of the best actions that you can take is at the voting booth. So, if you're interested in, in learning more about Detroit Action, you can go to detroitaction.org. If you're interested in the candidates, you can go to vote411. And, these are the best tools that you can have to be able to engage in the civic process.
And just to round things up, if you ever have any questions about the voting process, you can always go to michigan.gov/vote to learn about there. And you can also call the nonpartisan election hotline at 866-R-VOTE. Once again, 866-R-VOTE. And you can have someone call you back or call you live, talk to you live, and answer any of your questions. There are plenty of people here to help you demystify this process and help you express your vote this November and this August. Remember to vote in primaries.
Great. Thank
Yes,
you
please,
all again so
please
much.
vote in the primary. Thank you all.
Well, thank you all so much. We really appreciate it. Again, I'm Olivia Lewis with Bridge Detroit. Thank you. All voting is local. We really appreciate it. Detroit Action, League of Women Voters, Rashida Tlaib. Thank you all so much. And everyone have a great evening.